Hi, this is Hertzog here at the Social Club, and today I want to talk to you about cables, balanced versus unbalanced cables. What's the difference? When should you use each individual cable? I'll explain that. I'll also give you the theory behind how a balanced cable works and why it's always a better choice than an unbalanced cable. But unbalanced cables can still work in certain situations, like short enough runs. So let's get into it. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and I'm going to cover cables. Balanced, unbalanced, let's go. If you're like me and you've spent years, decades even, building home theater or hi-fi or home studios, you probably have a box or a drawer full of cables, right? Like all these different connectors. What are they all? Why do you have them? What do they all do? Female, male XLRs, RCAs, tip sleeve, tip ring sleeve. What makes these two different? Well, this one's unbalanced and this one's balanced. And I'll get into that. So let's talk about it. An unbalanced cable will use two conductors. It will use a hot cable that's shielded and then a sheath ground. The ground is to help try and reject any noise. That's why it surrounds the other cable. And it does as good of a job as it can. But it's not perfect. So in a cable like an RCA, for instance, that's a two-conductor cable, so it can only ever be unbalanced. You'll never get a balanced RCA cable. It doesn't exist. To add that extra conductor, you're now going to have to change your adapter at the end to either an XLR or a TRS adapter, tip ring sleeve. For this example, I'm going to use an RCA to represent our unbalanced signal and an XLR to represent the balanced signal. With the unbalanced cable, you have the shielded positive that runs inside the grounding sleeve. This is enough for the positive and the negative connection needed to transmit the analog signal over an unbalanced cable. With an unbalanced signal, the hot pin, the positive, carries the signal. If noise is introduced into the signal, there's no way to check for it and cancel it out. It will carry the noise it picked up as part of the signal. With a balanced cable, the hot pin carries the signal, same as in unbalanced. But instead of only having a ground, in a balanced cable, you have a negative pin which carries the exact opposite signal to the positive, an inverted signal, a perfect 180 degrees inverted. Now at the end of the cable, you compare the positive and the negative signals, and that allows any extra noise not present in the signal to be rejected. This is known as common mode rejection. This is how a balanced cable can improve your sound. In a balanced cable, the positive and negative signal are twisted together. This helps ensure the wires occupy the same average position over the length of the cable. That way, any extra noise introduced is introduced evenly to both the positive and the negative signals. Balanced cables are always recommended for connections when possible, but definitely for connections over 25 feet. The reason why is that built-in common mode noise rejection. So the only thing that comes out the other side of a balanced cable is a copy of the same signal that it started with, slightly louder. Now, an instrument cable is only a tip sleeve connector, and a balanced cable is a tip ring sleeve connector. Instrument cables are usually short enough runs that it's not that big of a deal to have a balanced cable. However, if you've ever played guitar or bass or anything with an amplifier, you might understand how you can have a bad cable and it can introduce hum and different noises and whatnot into the thing. Now, again, a lot of that has to do with your environment. It has to do with how noisy, electrically noisy of an environment you're operating in. And if you're in a place that has a lot of electrical noise and interference, your cables are more susceptible to picking up that noise, especially on longer runs. So try and keep your cables shorter. And if you have the option to run a balanced cable, absolutely run a balanced cable. Concerts are somewhere that XLR cables are vital, because when you have the distance from the stage to the front of the house mixer, it's a long distance sometimes. It can be hundreds of feet depending on if you're at a festival or whatever. Those cables need to make it there without noise entering into it. You can run a 1,000-foot cable that's balanced and there won't be any added noise to it. But if you tried that same run with an unbalanced cable, the noise would be almost as loud as the program material, just because you have a 1,000-foot antenna. In a studio, balanced connections are vital, as there's so many different electronic pieces working that they can all potentially introduce noise. So balanced connections are always used to ensure a noise-free signal. If you're doing cable runs over 25 feet, you absolutely want balanced cables, because a longer a wire is, the more of an antenna it becomes. A long wire is essentially an antenna, and the longer the run, the greater the probability that it will pick up some form of interference. Now, that interference can come from a variety of things. It can come from other items around you, like space heaters or your laptop's AC adapter, anything that has electronic circuits or electrical fields, like magnetic fields. When you're running an electric heater, that's a coil of wire. You're sending electricity through that, it heats up. You're creating a magnetic field that can introduce distortion and noise into your wires if they're running nearby. And you might not have ever realized that that was the culprit, but it can be. Now, this would not be an issue if you were running a balance cable. By using a balance cable and running it for 300 feet if you need, it doesn't matter. You're not going to pick up extra noise because it gets rejected as part of the cable's original design. And that's what makes it better. Now, if you're at home and you're looking at your HiFi setup and you're starting to realize, oh my God, I'm using all RCAs, and you're starting to get worried, don't. If you're running short enough runs, they're not going to pick up that noise. You can buy a well-shielded RCA cable that has enough insulation and shielding to block out that noise just from the ground sheath. But not all cables are created equal. So if you're using a not quite so well-made cable, not so well shielded, the introduction of noise will be much easier. So buy quality interconnects that help shield it. And when you're running long enough runs, make sure you use balanced cables if your gear supports it. Just be conscious of the length of the interconnects you're using. That's the important thing. One of the best ways to help reduce interference when you're running cables is when you intersect them, always cross them at 90 degrees. So they're making a clear cross. They're not running next to each other to where they can kind of couple. So just be mindful of your lengths of your cables, and it won't make as big of a difference if it's balanced or unbalanced. But if you have the option to run balanced, if your DAC or your interface takes an XLR, run an XLR. You're not saving yourself by running an RCA. You're potentially causing headaches. So avoid the headaches from the start and just use the balanced cable. I want to send a big thank you, shout out to all my patrons on Patreon, especially Zarina, Annie, Tom from Liquid Modern, Brian and Sarah from the Permanent Record Podcast, Aaron Veiling from Valingo, my partner in VHXRR, Rob Rowe, Saoirse, Thorson, and Cocaine for Toothaches. Thank you all for being members of the Social Club. If you want to find out how you can become a member, head over to patreon.com/Social Club Sound. See which one of the tiers fits what you're looking for and, sign up. Happy to have you as a member. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope maybe you learned something. If you did, please give this video a like, drop me a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. And if you do subscribe and you like these videos, make sure you ring the notification bell to make sure that they keep coming and that you know when my new videos pop up, because they're going to be coming regularly and I don't want you to miss them. So ding ding, ring that bell. Thanks to everyone out there. This has been Von Hertzog from the Social Club.